Hey everybody, it's Daniel here from InfoRest. Hope you're all doing well. So, as you probably have seen, the US inflation numbers came out weaker than expected, just like with PPI. And what happened to the equity markets and the bond markets, we saw basically the markets catapulted higher all day on CPI data just because of how weak it came out. There was fears, right, the week before that non-farm payrolls came out higher, stronger than expected. ISM prices was really hot. The ISM number also came in better than expected, right? We got bond yields approaching the 5% level. Bonds were selling off, etc., etc. All fears heading into the CPI report. And lo and behold, we got PPI and CPI, the two inflation metrics there, coming in weaker, sending equities higher. Now, when we look at S&P 500 here today, being Friday, January 17th, we see that the S&P 500 and NASDAQ both hit a resistance level on Thursday and had a little bit of a mini pullback. But today we're seeing both S&P 500 and NASDAQ kind of somewhat break that resistance level. What does that mean? Could that mean that we are ready for higher highs and we're ready to continue the bull trend? And the fact that Trump is coming in starting next week into office, could we see some bullish momentum, or are we going to get, or is it going to be a fake out where we're going to see equities completely reverse its breakout and print lower again, like we've been seeing in December and the start of this year? Lot to think about. Now, yes, things you can expect volatility, you can expect uncertainty with Trump, especially with tariffs, and especially when he comes into office, and it's going to be very interesting to see what he has to say. But that might be just short term. Medium term, when the markets start to digest the information and start to understand what's going on, we could start to see a bid with all the other potentially positive news that we could get in terms of taxes, in terms of maybe stimulus from the government, and most importantly, the Fed, right? So we're going to have to watch out what the Fed has to say, and especially with the weaker inflation numbers. Does this mean that we can start pricing in more rate cuts? And the easing that we've been getting from the Fed and central banks out there with the rate cuts is not, it doesn't end there. We have yet to see QT end. We have yet to see quantitative tightening end and possibly move into QE. And if you've been following the news, Bank of Canada announced that they will be ending their QT and possibly starting maybe QE end of 2026. So they're the first bank globally, Bank of Canada being the first bank globally to stop QT and start to announce that we are maybe thinking about QE end of 2026, right? So they're not going to start printing money all of a sudden. There's going to be a pause, and the fact that they're pausing on QT does bring does hint towards that stimulus might be coming down the road, but we just don't know when and how and where and what it will look like. Now, the thing about Bank of Canada, who announced that, could that be also a trigger or a pathway for the Fed to also start thinking about stopping QT, right? Although the Fed has been more of the laggard and the one falling behind and more trailing behind Bank of Canada. Bank of Canada has been the first one, as we've seen in the hiking cycle, the first one to hike, the first one to stop, the first one to cut, right? Cut aggressively as well. And then now the first one to stop QT, right? What does this mean in terms of the other central banks? Could we see other central banks follow through? And the Fed still kind of, being the laggard one, which would mean in terms of currencies, possibly the US dollar might be stronger and the other currencies out there, showing some sort of weakness. due to the policy differences, due to also, yes, Trump tariffs, where we could see other countries, like for example China, kind of devalue its currencies, and other countries out there as well do the same thing, while the US dollar becomes stronger and stronger. But with all these positive news and potential of QE and the end of QT and the back to the easing, don't be mistaken of that turning into a moment of a top in the equity markets. I'm not calling it a top in the equity markets right now. There's still potential of a runway for equities to move up higher. Don't be surprised if equities do move up higher and S&P 500 does make all-time highs, maybe even approaches 7,000, right? Right now we're sitting at 6,000. It can happen in a span of a year. You could get a massive melt up on just the news that, hey, QE coming, or the idea of QE coming in, and then people on the sidelines chasing the top. All these things can create the pieces that are needed for that top forming, and then eventually people being on one side of the trade, which all you would need is a fear event or a catalyst to bring a massive correction, or that long awaited recession that we've been talking about, right? So the pieces are starting to come together, and the fact that you're getting those rate cuts, maybe QT stopping, and then QE eventually starting. QE is not going to start just like that, just for the heck of it. It's going to start if really you get inflation super low, or you get that recession event that comes in, that okay, central banks need to start stimulating the economy. True stimulus is the quantitative easing. True stimulus is the pumping of money, right? So 2025, 2026 is going to be interesting, because let's also not forget that a lot of renewals for debt are coming in for this year, for 2025, and also 2026. And if you have no money printing, no QE, you have QT still happening, you have the dollar appreciating, the US dollar appreciating, you have quantitative tightening still happening, or just a standstill in terms of liquidity, you could get a crisis event in the equity markets on this. So very interesting to see how this is all playing out today. Let's see what happens next week when Trump comes in. And if you like to be informed and want to hear more on the next upcoming events and news and my take on it, please feel free to hit the subscribe button, hit the bell icon to be notified next video, the like button as well, and I'll see you guys around. Cheers, bye.